Great. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our featured guest today, Karen Maarouf. So Karen is the VP of Supplier Relations at Workforce Logiq. She also leads channel partnership teams. During her 30 years in the workforce industry, Karen has managed temporary staffing, VMS and MSP implementations, application support, product management, product marketing, account management, and corporate initiatives. Her teams are dedicated to providing Workforce Logiq customers and partners with the tools, analytics, and best practices needed to optimize workforce processes and quality. Karen, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Okay, so now I will introduce our other panelists, James Lucier, Executive Vice President of ProcureWise. So as Executive Vice President, Jim is responsible for executing go-to-market strategies, building client-driven growth, and driving the success of ProcureWise. He has co-founded 2 MSPs and led a staffing firm to national and global prominence. Jim embraces the transparency needed to build trust and develop valued client relationships and business partnerships for long-term success. He frequently presents on topics related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and digital transformation in the future of work. So Jim, thanks for being here. Great to have you guys. And with that, I'm going to kick it off to you to start the discussion.
Thank you, Sheila.
Yep. Thank you, Sheila. And hi, Karen.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining today. I've been excited about this session since you and I first talked about it. And, I mentioned in preparation that I had done a little research on supplier relationship management and suppliers of the future. And I actually went back to do that. I found an interesting article from SIA in January of 2011 about the future of staffing. And there were a lot of predictions in there. SIA really had gathered these predictions from MSPs and suppliers. Well, I'd say in 2021, the future looks at least a little different than as predicted. Right. But for our discussion today, I thought we'd take it from the perspective of the future of work is here. And then we can talk about what MSPs and the clients that MSPs serve are really looking for from staffing firms in 2021. Okay?
Great.
All right. So I'm sure, you know this, that there are a lot of similarities between staffing firms.
Yes.
So I'm curious, are there certain things that really stand out to you in terms of supplier relations management of what MSPs and clients are looking for with staffing firms in 2021?
There are some things. I will say that the thing that doesn't change, that is always something we're looking for and customers are looking for, is performance, right? I mean, the metrics need to be there. There need to be solid placements, fair market rates, good cycle times, all of that good stuff. But what I think is really coming to the forefront, unfortunately, in part because of our world situation, and believe me, my heart goes out to everybody who's been directly affected by the world situation, and I truly feel blessed to be both healthy and employed. But some of the things that are coming out and some of the things that suppliers are showing is who they are as a company. And I think that's really important today. And what I mean by that is there were kind of a variety of responses to the pandemic. But the 2 that I noticed the most were suppliers that went at it at the standpoint of what are we going to do to survive? And then suppliers who went at it at the standpoint of what are we going to do to make this better for others? Like, how are we going to add value for our customers? How are we going to support our industry as a whole? What are we going to do to make sure that we're doing our best to put people to work who have lost their jobs because of this? To me, those are the suppliers that are going to survive and thrive as we work through this and with the future of work, because customers and MSPs are not only looking at performance today, they're looking at who you are as a company, what you represent, your social responsibility, whether or not you're in the business for the right reasons, right? It's not just about making money. Of course, that's why we're all in business. But are you supporting people? Are you supporting your environment, your community? Are you really interested in being a strategic partner and helping the MSP and or your customer meet their goals? Or are you just trying to put people in seats so you can make money, right? I think that's a huge difference. And another thing that's a huge difference is flexibility. We all had to pivot and turn, right, with everything that happened in the last year. And I think the suppliers that are nimble and quickly determine what the right thing to do based on the situation are the ones that, again, that are going to survive and thrive.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm always interested in, first of all, thank you for sharing those really key points about what you're looking for in suppliers, which means what your clients are looking for, right? But I'm always interested in, how do you figure that out, really? How do you determine that? Because, suppliers, sometimes the stories sound really similar, and they may be very similar, right? There are so many companies in the industry that share a lot of similarities, and some are, so many that are good at what they do. But how do you really assess and determine, well, are they really good at that? Can they really do that? Are they really doing things in a socially responsible and sustainable manner? The kinds of points that you made.
Right. Well, there's some work that goes into it and it's much more sophisticated than it used to be, right? And I started in staffing back in the days when it required a box of donuts. Today, there needs to be more behind it. So we look at a variety of things. Any supplier, frankly, out there that is still doing the presentation of we can do everything, anywhere, anytime, stop it. Nobody's going to believe you. We don't want to know what you can do. We want to know what you do, what you have done, and what you do well. So I really strongly recommend that that's what you focus on, because that's where you're going to be more successful. But as far as figuring out who truly is doing the right thing, there's a number of things involved. First of all, it's really getting to know the people, right? Who a company hires and how that person looks at life and business is a big indicator of who that company is, right? So look at the people, do the research on the websites, talk to your competitors. I have great relationships with pretty much everybody in a similar role to mine at other MSPs. And so we're going to learn from each other, and we always do. So I think that's important. When you can, check a reference or two. But I think the more you're at it, the more you're able to really get a feeling for who a company is, or what a company is, if you will. Are there times where I probably have missed out on a great supplier? Absolutely. Are there times where I've made a decision based on what I believe to be true and it turned out not to be? Absolutely. But you learn with each one of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the key is to be quick to respond. So if somebody says they can do something, you have them set up to do it, and they don't do it, there needs to be a consequence. You need to, first, I believe ultimately performance is not just in the hands of the supplier, right? There are a lot of people involved in a requisition. So I don't assume bad metrics mean a bad supplier, but I'm going to dig in there and see, are the managers being responsive? Are the job descriptions adequate? Are we doing those intake calls? Are the rates in line with the market? All the things that should set up a supplier for success. If we've done that well and they're not performing, then we're going to have a chat. And maybe it's going to be, let's work together to figure out how you can do better. We're not going to immediately say this isn't working, unless, of course, they've done something that is against policy or worse, against the law.
Yeah. Okay. Well, when we were preparing, I mentioned that we'd probably go through 3 or 4 topics and then go to some Q&A. And I just want to say just maybe one more follow-up question on this topic before moving on to the next one. And that's you mentioned, a supplier really, you didn't say discussion or conversation with you. Let me just put it that way for now. Having a real conversation with you about what they really can do, what they're really doing, how they're really doing it, right? But of course, you can't field everyone's conversations all the time because there are so many suppliers and you have so many programs and there's so much work to do, right? And the same for, I'm sure, your team everywhere. So, what are some ways that you would suggest that suppliers communicate some of that? I'm sort of thinking it can't all be at once.
Right.
Maybe.
Well, And the bottom line is every supplier can't expect to get an opportunity with them at every MSP, right? Just as when you're selling to a customer, you don't win every one. We
Right.
want to give opportunities to those that deserve opportunities. But ultimately, at least from Workforce Logiq standpoint, if we have an opportunity with a customer, we're going to first look at the suppliers who are doing a great job with us for other customers with similar needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it only makes good sense for us to build up our top performers, because ultimately, if they're getting a lot of business from us, we become a priority for them, because they're not just competing for our business, we're competing for their talent. So when somebody gets an awesome candidate, I want them to say, this candidate belongs at Workforce Logiq customer X, right? And in order to do that, they need to know that we are out for them and doing things in their best interest as well. So we're all selling all the time, right? So when it comes to suppliers who aren't currently working with an MSP, it can be very hard to get that first customer. And I understand that. I always think of, the old Army commercial. How do you get the experience?
Mm-hmm.
But the way that you can show those things if you don't have an opportunity for a conversation, and as you mentioned, James, there are, depending on who you talk to, 30,000 suppliers in the US alone, and we're global, and we already work with 8,000 suppliers. So I'm not going to have the time to talk to everybody. My team's not going to have the time to talk to everybody. If we are talking to everybody, we're not doing the things we need to do to get business for the suppliers we have, right? So ultimately, case studies are important. If you won an industry award from another MSP, we're going to pay attention to that. If you've got a compelling case study, I recently had a supplier that provided a case study around what they had done for a particular industry, and I'm not going to share too many details, but and it had grown a business, and the customer had a quote in this case study, and it was very compelling, and we had a similar customer, and that got them an opportunity. But sometimes, it's timing as well. You'd be the best supplier on the planet, but if I don't have an opportunity that meets what you do, it might be a little while before we can work together.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I think that's a lot of information that I'm sure many people will find helpful. So you may not be that close to this in supplier relations without being, of course, hands-on in programs every day, but a lot of companies are remaining remote. I'm sure
Yes.
many of the companies whose programs you manage, at least for now, right?
Yes.
And they've either pushed out, kind of their back to campus days, or they're not even sure when it's going to be yet. I think some of them have even said we may not be going back, right?
Yeah.
So just from, even though it might not be something that you touch every day, but from a supplier relations perspective, what do staffing firms need to know about what MSPs and clients are looking for from staffing firms relative to the whole process around sourcing talent in a remote environment, but also engaging and managing that talent?
Well, I think not only what customers are looking for, but what a supplier needs to do to protect themselves is do every bit of vetting they can, right? Because now you're going to have a worker that is working without direct supervision, typically, getting a couple of phone calls a day, maybe from management. There's less control over what they do. So a rule of thumb that I would use if I were a supplier is, if I wouldn't be willing to have this resource work for me remotely, I'm not going to send them to a client to work remotely, right? So the vetting needs to be stronger. I think there needs to be more check-ins with the workers, because again, they're not getting the direct attention from the customer as much as they would if they were on site. So the supplier team should make sure they're doing everything they can from a retention standpoint. They're working from home. You don't know if they've got the customers' work they're doing on one monitor and looking for other jobs on the other monitor. You want to keep them engaged. You want to keep them happy because you want to make sure they fulfill that assignment. I also think that this is an area where, the background screenings are so important. What an opportunity for workers if they're working from home, if they aren't a do the right thing kind of person, to find a reason or opportunity to have a legal issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, thank you for addressing that. And now I'd like to talk about what may be the most talked about subject in contingent workforce in the last maybe 6 to 9 months after being a seldom talked about subject in the years preceding, right? And that's diversity and inclusion. So that's really become top of mind, I think, with enterprises,
Yes.
right, from executive teams on down. And it's certainly, I think, now become top of mind in the contingent workforce, where the real focus had been on the full-time workforce.
Right.
So how has that, what's changed in supplier relations as a result of that? What are you looking for from staffing firms around diversity and inclusion?
I am so excited to talk about this because I remember when diversity first became a differentiator in the staffing industry, right? And you suddenly had a lot of companies who were 51% owned by their wife or 51% owned by their diverse business partner, what have you, because diversity became a differentiator. Well, that didn't bode well for the larger companies who simply couldn't be diversity owned because, maybe they were backed by a VC company, or they had board of directors, or they were public, what have you. Today, a diversity differentiator can be for any company, because what's going to matter today is not, who owns is still a consideration when it comes to spend, but it matters what you do to attract and include a diverse workforce, right? So it goes back to what I was talking about before, about doing the right thing. I think ultimately a company should be working towards diversity because it's the right thing to do, not because it's a business opportunity. It naturally leads to the business opportunity, right? If you are working to recruit diverse people by going to the right places to recruit people, you're going to have a bigger workforce. You're going to make more placements. You're going to make more money. But it's about doing the right thing. And it's another area where you can look at who a company is, because diverse ownership is one thing, but what are they doing to support diversity in their community? What are they doing to support inclusion in their community? Are they making sure that they're recruiting for different areas based on the diverse makeup of that region, right? What are they doing? And it's been very exciting because I've had a number of suppliers reach out to me and show me what they're doing. And we've got some that are focused on veterans, some that are focused on putting women back to work, some that are focused on a variety of diverse groups. And what's exciting about that to me is that we too have taken a look in the mirror, right? I think all of us, between all the world situations, have been very introspective these days, both personally and professionally. And what I realized is that I've been saying with pride for years that we work with hundreds of diversity-owned suppliers, and we do. But when I took a closer look at the makeup of those diversity-owned suppliers, the large majority are from one diverse group. So I need to expand. I need to find suppliers that are veteran-owned. I need to get more women-owned suppliers. I need to do that. In addition, our company focus on diversity and inclusion has always been there, but has increased a great deal. As a matter of fact, I'm on our corporate committee for diversity and inclusion, and we have a wonderful VP of diversity and inclusion, and we're doing a number of things. And one of the things I'm doing is those suppliers I talked about that are coming to me and showing me presentations of what they're doing for diversity. By the way, I don't want to just see your plan. I want to see results. I am keeping those handy because we will be taking our diversity and inclusion program out to customers, and I will have those suppliers at the ready.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's wonderful. I think it was a long time coming, and we all should have been focused there long ago, and it just benefits everybody.
Right, I agree. Yeah. Well, I have to point out, Workforce Logiq has done it again, ranked the #1 global MSP by HRO's Baker's Dozen.
Yes.
So a tremendous accomplishment because, there are quite a few pretty good global MSPs, right?
Absolutely.
So what a standout achievement. And I'm sure you and your team made a significant contribution because the work that you do is so important. So I'm interested in knowing about, you mentioned, for instance, that I guess peers, colleagues, counterparts throughout the industry. And, different MSPs take a very different approach to supplier relationship management, for sure.
Right.
But I think, you lead one of the most outstanding supplier relationship teams in the industry. So, I'd like to hear about what sets Workforce Logiq apart in terms of supplier relations.
Well, I thank you for that, but I have to say none of what my team and I did would matter at all if we didn't also excel at providing the MSP services on site. Because ultimately, the program teams that are on site are the ones that are managing the day-to-day activity in the right way, providing the suppliers with that healthy competitive environment where every supplier has the same information that's needed to be successful, and then it's up to them to take that to success. Making sure that suppliers are associated with the right types of jobs, the right locations, that they're getting the feedback they need, that they have the intake calls on requisitions, because we all know a job description is probably pulled off the intranet and thrown in and doesn't tell you what you really need to know. So it's really the program teams that are taking what we provide to the very next level and making sure that those suppliers are successful within a program. So I have to say it's the company overall that is leading to the success. And yes, the suppliers and the MSP have a large part of that success. Also, the commitment of our leadership teams on innovation and on making investments where they make good sense, and on really listening to the customers. I've worked with a number of different executive teams, and I have to say that the fact that they're hands-on and speaking to the customers and making sure that everybody is doing the right thing as far as moving the company forward is just so wonderful, and that's where the results come from.
Great. So I think we probably need to recognize that many of the people on the call today, or in our I say the call, I'm used to saying that, right? In our session today, already calling on Workforce Logiq somewhere.
Yes.
Right? And if they're not, they're going to want to.
Yes.
After being in this session. So let me first say to everyone that has joined us, and I think this is one of the largest crowds of the day, Karen. So you're a big draw. That I just think is wonderful that you're here. I mean, there's no personal or company gain really in you being here. This is you giving back to the supplier community. So I want to recognize that for everyone in the session, and I want to thank you for doing that. At the same time, I want to suggest maybe to the people in the session that as you continue or start calling on Workforce Logiq, that you respect the way that they would like to be contacted, and the approach that they might prefer that you take in terms of reaching out to them. So Karen, if you don't mind, since that was probably always the elephant in the room, right? In terms of when you have somebody in supplier relationship management in a presentation, can you share with us a little bit about the way that you would like to see suppliers call on, contact, interact with your team?
Certainly. I first want to say, as far as what you said, thanking me for being here. I work with suppliers because that's my passion. So I will gladly reach out to suppliers anytime that I can. As Sheila mentioned in my intro, I'm old. I've been around for a long time. Done pretty much everything there is to do in MSP, with the exception of being on site at a customer, because I never wanted to do that. But supplier relations matters to me. I started as a supplier, and I really understand that engaging suppliers, setting them up for success, and rewarding success with more business is the key, one of the keys to a successful MSP. As far as how to contact us, there is a supplier profile on our website. You want to make sure you fill that out. I can assure you we use those profiles religiously. And at that point, you're there and available for opportunities. As I said earlier, and I think you all know who know me, you'll get honesty from me every time. We're going to look at our existing suppliers first because it's the right thing to do from a business perspective. If there are things that you are confident set you apart from the 30,000 others out there, and you've got case studies or scorecards or awards or anything really meaningful, feel free to send that my way via email. And I say via email because I average about 6 hours of meetings a day. You're not going to get me on the phone. I wish I could. Believe me, I would spend all day talking to suppliers if I could, but that's not what's going to get us where we need to go. So email me. I'll even give you my email address. It's kmaarouf@workforcelogiq.com. I may refer you to one of my team members, but feel free to email me with anything that you think is compelling and is going to set you apart in the industry.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your contact information with the attendees. I'm sure that some people don't know you and after today would really like to get to know you. So thank you so much for that. We have about 10 minutes, really about 15, but we have a hard stop, as Sheila mentioned. So maybe we can move into, if Sheila, you're there to come on, we can move into our Q&A.
And I see a few questions in the chat.
Yeah. So she can help us go through that.
Great. I'm happy to moderate the Q&A. Thanks for transitioning early, Jim. We have had a lot of engagement with this panel, and I want to make sure we get everything.
Yes.
Okay, so Karen, the first question is, what do you suggest for small companies with quality recruiters who are competing with big names or established brands? How can they differentiate themselves and build relationships?
I will tell you that we personally work with a large number of smaller suppliers, and size is not a consideration unless it's a situation where I'm going to reach out to you and say, this customer is going to need 1,000 people and you can't do that, then you need to be honest with me. But size is not a consideration. It's all still about performance. And frankly, in some of the niche roles, the smaller suppliers tend to do better because that's their focus. So I would say to a small supplier, if I were starting a supply company today, which I won't be doing, but if I were, I would say, know who you are, specialize, focus your recruiting there, and that'll get you indoors. Now, the interesting thing about MSPs is once you're in an MSP program, because you're specialized, they're going to probably want you to generalize, because if you're performing well, they're going to say, hey, can you also do this? And those of us who have a staffing background know, while it's not always easy, it's not that difficult to go into a different specialty. You just have to hire the right recruiters.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that for our DE&I, especially, we've had a lot of different unique niche suppliers that are smaller, and they specialize in veteran hiring and the like. Okay, great. So the next question is, so many MSPs serve as gatekeepers to client, and any communication between the sub-vendor and the end client is prohibited. So how can questions on bad requirements be expedited directly if the MSP is that gatekeeper? How do you kind of push back on a job requisition or a job description with the MSP as the interlocutor? What's the best practice?
I'll tell you what, we used to have a very tight lock there, right? You cannot talk to our customer. We've loosened up on that over the years, as we have on many things, as we learn more about what works. For the majority of our program teams, if the client approves, some clients don't want the communication, they're going to set up intake calls on the requisitions to make sure that every supplier gets the same information. That's the reason for that. So the manager's on the call, the suppliers that have the rec are on the call, they can ask all the questions they want. Again, we're trying to create that healthy, even playing field. For other programs, they have open communication. For some, they say, sure, talk to the manager, but put me on the call because we want to be there so we can help facilitate. It just depends on the program, but we realized pretty early on that a job description is not all you need to make a good placement, period.
Yeah, that's great advice. And yeah, I didn't know that about some MSPs, that the lines of communication are opening up. So that's great to hear that the industry is kind of exploring new avenues. That's great. Okay, here's kind of an easy question, but the answer is important. So what's one thing that you could say to a vendor and the vendor, like the MSP, and they would listen to you and it would differentiate them? What's like the one thing that you need to hear in your elevator pitch?
You know, it's funny because I hear so many, so it's hard to pinpoint one thing. But the thing I would say, anything that stands out. So if somebody says, for example, I'm a veteran, I focus on veteran recruiting, I'm going to listen to that. If somebody says, you know what, we do one thing and we don't do one thing well, I'm going to listen to that. I might even be motivated enough to work some extra hours that day and do some searching to see what customers we have that might need that, because that's meaningful, particularly if you have proof of your success. I will tell you that I don't want people to hear this and then decide that's what they're going to say if it's not true. I actually had a situation once where I'd done a conference and somebody called me afterwards because during the conference I said we were needing suppliers who placed Workday people. We don't anymore. But I said that, and they called and I said, so tell me about your Workday experience. And they said, oh, we've been working with Workday positions for over 10 years. Workday hasn't existed for 10 years.
Oh, wow,
So,
really?
don't tell me it if it isn't true.
There you go. Okay, great. That segues into my next question, which it's just the opposite. So what's something that you see in a pitch and it's a red flag, like big zero, absolutely not? So obviously falsehoods are a good one, but besides falsehoods, what's another red flag for you?
Leading with we're diversity owned, because that's a wonderful thing, but it only matters if you perform well, right? So I want to know that, but I don't want that to be the lead. The other thing in general, and I think you would hear this in any sales training you did, don't start by telling me about you. Ask me what my needs are. You can't fill my needs if you don't know what they are, right? So when somebody jumps in on a pitch and says, this is why we're wonderful, and then they expect me to react to it, my reaction is going to be, thank you.
Great. Yeah, no, sometimes that's all that it means. Okay, this next question, I'm going to do my best to phrase it. Maybe you'll know more what it means than I do, and if not, we can skip it. So what do you think of the concept of like the next generation MSP? Do you think that there's an expectation in the organization that traditional reporting will go beyond the rearview mirror of what's just happened with your suppliers in both contingent workforce and in SOW services? So yeah, go ahead.
Artificial intelligence and predictive analytics?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it's a perfect question for me and for my company because we excel in that area, and I'm not bashful in saying so. We have Engage, which is our artificial intelligence company, and we are going out to customers and sharing with them not only here's what happened, but here's what will happen if you move that hiring to this state. Here's what will happen if you move that hiring to remote workers here. We're doing analytics on where the largest concentration of diverse suppliers and workers are, on where the largest remote workforces are, on which employers have the lowest turnover, all those kinds of things, so that we can actually go to a customer and say, this is what happened. Now, if we take the same data and move it here, this is what would have happened, to help them guide where they should go. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, if I just might mention to the audience, there's a lot of great information about your analytics capabilities on the website. In fact, I think Workforce Logiq has a really interesting website, lots of great useful information for suppliers. Definitely a lot to learn there.
Okay,
yes, that's a good point. I talked about customers, but those analytics can help the suppliers as well, because you're trying to recruit. We're going to tell you where the people are.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, good. So this is another question. It's along the same lines, but maybe it's more tactical. So you're contacted by suppliers every day. Your entire team is. So what, like in your actual experience of being contacted, like what's a pitch that has gotten you to reply, either via email or phone or LinkedIn? Like what was the channel? what was the subject line? What did it say? Like those nitty gritty details.
Yeah. Well, in all honesty, these days I'm working on a number of initiatives, so I don't have the luxury to speak with suppliers as much as I'd like to.
Sure.
But I can tell you that in the past, some things that will catch my eye are things about. It's not a 3-paragraph. This is why we're great. It's a, hey Karen, I heard that Workforce Logiq might need these kind of people, and we have these kind of people. It's very targeted. It's again about our company's needs and that sort of thing. Or they say, wanted to let you know that we were engaged with XYZ customer through Pontoon, and we started out in tier 2, and in 6 months we had 100 placements, and now we're tier 1. That's compelling. That's meaningful. That's information that frankly I can check, and information that says you are familiar with working with MSPs and you do it well.
Great. Yeah, verifiable information. It's a good tip. Okay. I don't want to beat a dead horse, and I don't want to make you feel like you're a witness on a trial stand. So I'm going to wrap it up.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm going to wrap up.
I've been watching a trial recently, so I'm used to it.
Oh, well. 2 questions. One is logistics. Would you mind if we dropped your email in the chat? I know that you shared it earlier, but would you mind if we just put it in for the attendees to see?
Please do.
Okay, I will do that. And then the next question is, so, I mean, it's topical, but obviously 2020, no one saw this coming. Here we are in 2021. If you had one piece of advice to suppliers who are looking to break into the MSP market, especially in this kind of new frontier of work from home and the like it's a rough time out there, what's one piece of advice you would give?
So breaking into the MSP market is hard because everybody like me wants MSP experience before we put you in an MSP, because it's so different from traditional staffing. So I'd want to hear that you've set up a separate practice, that you've done your research, that you understand how MSP works, and then again, see any differentiator. This is what we're doing to make sure we get the kind of candidates that you need. This is what we're doing to get diverse candidates, what have you. Because it's tough. It's tough if you don't have the experience. Bless you.
Thank you. Okay, great. So sorry, I didn't mean to derail you. So making sure you've done your research, founding a different organization. Yep, that all sounds great. Anything you shouldn't do in 2021? Like what would just kill you on the spot?
You know, something that I wouldn't have said before is, but I will now based on what we learned through the pandemic, putting all your eggs in one basket industry-wise, right?
Ooh, yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons that Workforce Logiq was effective, but not to the degree we could have been, is we have a nice, diverse industry mix in our client base. I know suppliers that specialized in travel placement.
Yeah.
Kind of tough, right? Energy could be tough. Automotive could be tough. So have work to have a diverse supply base so that inevitably there's going to be something that affects our industry. We never thought it would be a pandemic, but we've all been through, different ebbs and flows of the economy. Be diverse in everything you do.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I'm surprised that hasn't come up more specifically today. Just, suppliers who specialized in hospitality, travel, like this past year has just been, horrible. So that's a great point. Yeah. Okay. Again, so I think we can end a bit early. So for everyone's reference, Karen's email is now in the chat. To all of our attendees, thank you for coming. I know this was a big panel that we promoted. This had a lot of attention, so thank you for coming. Karen, thank you so much for your insights. It's great to have you and just share your experience with our suppliers. It's wonderful. Jim, thank you for moderating. Great job. Everyone, check out our different agenda, our different sessions, and I'll see you soon. Thank you all.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.